Hello everyone, good morning. My name is Rajat and I lead the healthcare digital business for GE Healthcare, covering Middle East and Africa. It is my great pleasure and honor to be here today, addressing this very esteemed audience and sharing with you what we in GE Healthcare and in digital are calling Edison. So Edison is our platform. It's a way of thinking. It's a digital thread through which we want to make sure that we, for our customers and for our partners and for the broader world and particularly for our patients, are able to embed artificial intelligence in everything we do. So I'll take the next half an hour walking you through what is Edison, what are some of the problems that we're trying to solve using Edison, and then how can we potentially work together. And then of course maybe I'll take a few questions depending on the time. So, I think there are a few things that every time you talk to people in healthcare, whether it's in Turkey, whether it's in Middle East, or whether it's in the US, there are some themes that are common. There are customers who are hospitals, either public or private, or thought leaders in the ministries of health. They're always coming to us and to peers in our industry with some challenges that are common. Some of these challenges around capacity. As healthcare becomes or tries to become more and more precise, the ability for doctors to have more and more specialization is difficult. It is really, really difficult and expensive in terms of time, effort, energy, focus that a person has to do today to become a specialist and a super specialist in their field. I am constantly amazed by the dedication, the hard work, and of course the intelligence that doctors have today. But it's stretching them. It's stretching the doctors and it's stretching healthcare as an industry. Then there's a concept around productivity. In Turkey, I always hear that reimbursement rates have stayed flat for the last 10 plus years, which means that from a cost perspective, the hospitals are being asked to do the same with the same amount of cost that was being paid 10 years ago, and yet they have to deliver more. Customers want and patients want the Amazonification of healthcare. They want the Uberization of healthcare. They determine and they need fantastic new patient experience. And yet, there is a tremendous cost pressure on the healthcare systems, particularly in a country like Turkey, which is universal general healthcare, to be able to provide that. And then finally, it's about outcomes. The point of doing healthcare is not to get a patient in the hospital. Ideally, you want to avoid the patient coming into the hospital. And if the patient has come in, try to treat the patient with the minimum cost, with the minimum time, and of course with the best possible outcome, avoiding remission. These are not new challenges. I'm sure all of you sitting in the room know about these and other challenges. What I want to do was to just set this context so we can talk about what does this mean when we as GE Healthcare think about precision healthcare. And precision is becoming more and more important. As cost is being squeezed, productivity is being expected, we cannot expect the doctors to try 15 therapies or 8 therapies or even 2 therapies before they get the result. It's just not acceptable, unfortunately, in today's world. So having preciseness and speed is important. The other element of preciseness that is extremely important, and I'll talk about that in some examples where we are focusing with artificial intelligence, is speed. For example, stroke management. When a potential patient has a stroke, the speed with which the healthcare system can respond to the stroke is so much more important than anything else. Being able to diagnose, being able to figure out the exact model of treatment is time critical. And in the case of a brain stroke, time literally is brain, right? How much you can save and how much you can avoid and prevent any damage to that patient's brain. And then there is a third element. The third element is around monitoring. And this is something that maybe you hear the most about, and I want to make sure I talk about it also, is images, right? A lot of artificial intelligence that we are hearing today is about image recognition. When I was a computer engineer 15, 20 years ago, we had the same algorithms for image recognition. Whether it is the general adversarial network models, whether it is the Markov chains, the algorithms haven't changed. But two things have changed in the last 20 years. Computing power. The computing power that I had in my university mini computer, which was a smaller form of a supercomputer, is probably still less than what exists on my iPhone today. So the same algorithm now can run at literally billions and trillions of times the same speed, and therefore for what me was a theoretical exercise, which would take me 5 days to compute, can be done in a microsecond. The other thing that has changed is the amount of data that is available. 30 years ago, when people didn't have access to even ultrasounds, forget about MRIs and CTs, most of the imaging data was at best X-rays, and those two were film-based X-rays. And it's very important to also understand that while on one side, artificial intelligence will be a leap for a lot of organizations and healthcare systems, it is important to understand that one important step before artificial intelligence is digitization. Because the artificial intelligence does not speak English. At least it will in the future, but not yet, which is called natural language processing. But until it gets there, it has to have data, which means either images, or patient records, or lab results, or the information how patient is moving through a clinical pathway from a primary healthcare center to a hospital and back. All this information will need to be digitized. So with that, I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about how are we in GE Healthcare thinking about trying to solve some of these macro problems. And we've tried to put it under an umbrella term called Edison. So some of you may know Edison, Thomas Alva Edison, who's the founder of GE, also the inventor of light bulbs, AC current, etc. We are trying to use his name because what we're trying to say is that digital and artificial intelligence is not something that we will do as a piecemeal exercise, which means for us, when we think about artificial intelligence, it needs to transcend boundaries. And there are 3 different ways we are thinking about artificial intelligence. Number 1, data and content. As I mentioned before on the previous page, it's important to make sure that we understand that to do artificial intelligence, we need to have data. And therefore, having a platform of services, which firstly we were trying to use internally, but eventually we want to open to our partners. And partners can be startups, partners can be individual software vendors, but we also have partners such as big healthcare institutions. And I'll talk about that in a second. This is important because this is the foundation, the platform on which GE, with its internal and external partners, will develop today's and tomorrow's artificial intelligence algorithms. So that's the development part. And once you develop these algorithms, and this is the crux of this conversation, today there are, I think, 450 plus startups globally that are working on artificial intelligence algorithms in healthcare. And these cover everything from, I was talking to a startup a few weeks ago on looking at an ECG and being able to diagnose the 15 most common potential, heart issues from an ECG. Fantastic. That's a great artificial intelligence algorithm. And they came to us and they said, we have this great algorithm, but how do we do 2 things? How do we commercialize it and or broaden its reach? And number 2, how do we integrate this into the clinical pathway and workflow? And this is extremely important because a lot of organizations are talking about individual artificial intelligence algorithms, whether it is looking at a chest X-ray and diagnosing tuberculosis, or looking at biomarkers and trying to diagnose the exact type of cancer. This is fantastic, but how do you embed it? So our concept here is that we want to do 3 things. Number 1, we want to provide a platform called Edison. It's called the Edison platform, and I'll explain in a second, where GE and partners can develop artificial intelligence. But then we want to make sure that we are able to seamlessly integrate this artificial intelligence into 2 things. Either into digital applications in radiology, in cardiology, in critical care and beyond, or directly into machines. An example that I want to share is that we are just going through 510K filing in the US on one of our 3D MRI machines, which has a new technology called AirX. And what it does is, we have done some back-end artificial intelligence, which is trying to see that when you bring in a patient who needs an MRI scan every 2 weeks, maybe you are trying to see how the post-tumor, how the brain is progressing and if there is anything coming back, the MRI machine now is smart enough to know that it's the same patient and automatically set up the slices. The point of all this is that we don't want artificial intelligence to be in your face, like, oh my God, look at artificial intelligence. No, it's the opposite. The aim of artificial intelligence is for the technician, for the radiologist, for the doctor, for the clinician, to seamlessly, behind the scenes, help them do what they want, because that's the end aim. And one of our biggest concerns today is that a lot of companies out there are talking about artificial intelligence as this sexy thing, and we are trying to talk about it exactly the opposite. That no, for us, artificial intelligence is something that needs to be so transparent and so seamless that it's like someone who's tapping on your shoulder. Hey, you know what? You've got 20 radiology exams to look at. Hey, you know what? If I were you, I would probably look at this exam first because I am the AI algorithm that has already scanned these 20 exams, looked at the images, and seen that out of these 20, one of them is an X-ray of a patient who just came out of surgery 30 minutes ago, and he's had a lung collapse. Oh, oops. This is the sort of artificial intelligence we are talking about. Not like, oh, look at us, what artificial intelligence. Because the end aim is not artificial intelligence. It is a tool to drive precision healthcare and precision medicine. So I think I mentioned that before. So I'll spend a bit of time on the platform, and this I think is important because for a couple of reasons. Number one, if you look at hospitals today, a hospital, and I'm not even talking about a digital hospital, a standard non-modern hospital can generate up to 50 petabytes of data. And yes, a lot of that is imaging data from the radiology department, but there is also data like no-shows. For example, the probability that a person will come for an appointment at 8 o'clock in the morning, considering there was an earthquake in Turkey yesterday, is probably lower. So we have these artificial intelligence algorithms which are trying to, in the background, optimize how to even do scheduling of patients. And if there was an earthquake yesterday, maybe people are a bit concerned, maybe they won't come, right? And it's trying to take all these macro factors into account and trying to figure out no-shows. When you have a hospital system and a hospital infrastructure where patients have wait times of 2 weeks or 3 weeks, any spot that you waste because the patient doesn't show up is such a tremendous cost for that healthcare system, as an example. And then of course there are algorithms, as I said, built on top of that. The only two things I'll say about algorithms as it comes to healthcare is everyone is struggling to do two things with algorithms. And these two elements are what I would like you to leave when you think about algorithms in healthcare. Number one, ethics. Trying to build the right ethics into an algorithm is very difficult. And we are still figuring out and learning how to do it, but that's one of the first principles that we have as G Healthcare, that these algorithms need to follow healthcare ethics. I'll give you an example in a different industry, right? When you're thinking about self-driving cars, you have an algorithm that is managing where a car is going. There are 4 passengers in the car and there are 3 pedestrians on the road. Should the car brake or should the car go into the pedestrians? Who makes that decision? I'm giving you that example because in healthcare there are similar ethical challenges that come up. For example, a patient has a brain tumor. You can either do an invasive brain surgery or you can use a cath lab and try to do a non-invasive procedure. The problem is, when you are trying to do a non-invasive cath lab based procedure, the amount of X-ray dose that's going into the head is tremendous. So you need support to make the right decision. That is the additional radiation dose that you will give to the patient through the cath lab worth the cost of the patient's quality of life and duration of life versus doing an invasive procedure. And these are the sort of questions we're trying to answer. And then the second question that we're trying to answer is transparency. A lot of artificial intelligence today is black box. What that means is, if you read studies, and I'm hoping you will as it becomes more common, today the way algorithms work, because it's an algorithm and not a human, the algorithm will say, based on this sample size of blah, 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 blah cases, 3 million exams, we have a 98% probability that this patient has stage 2 cancer or stage 3 cancer. Fantastic. Now you've got this result from the artificial intelligence algorithm. And as a doctor or as a radiologist, you're like, my God, this is scary. But is this correct or not? I don't know. And this is where the element of transparency comes, where the algorithm should say, wait, let me explain. Look, I looked at 3 million exams, but out of these 3 million exams, these were the 24 exams which looked very similar. And when I go into the details, I saw this area in these exams that looks very similar. So now the radiologist is saying, okay, I'm more comfortable. This is not a black box telling me 98.7% accuracy. No, this is an algorithm that's trying to walk you through how it's come to a decision. Because I think you probably know this better than me that as of today, and maybe this will change in the future, healthcare is not an exact science. This is not a car which can gauge the distance using a LiDAR, what is called a LiDAR or a laser detector, the distance from here to this obstacle and say stop. In healthcare, there are nuances. We as, you as medical professionals may not always know how the body works or how the body reacts, and therefore that element of transparency is very important. And I wanted to, give you some examples that this is not theory. And I was here last year at HIMSS, and I'm giving a lot of presentations on artificial intelligence in the region, and it's important to, explain that this is real. So we've just launched a few weeks ago an instance of our platform for startups in India. It's called Edison X. We will be choosing, I think, up to 25 or 30 startups who will be focused on real challenges. And the reason this platform is important is we believe that no single organization, whether a medtech company like us, or a hospital or a country, can solve the challenges in front of us. We need to bring people together, and we need to get the collective expertise of a lot of different type of people. I was so amazed. So I attended a general artificial intelligence event in Dubai about four weeks ago, and there were these kids. They were probably 12 to 16 years old, and they had these fantastic algorithms that they had written. And I was talking to a few of them offline, and their way of thinking was just so creative, so unique. So I'll give you an example. They were trying to look at image recognition, live image recognition, and they were trying to do what is called face tracking, like how do you track a face? And they said, and they were talking to me, and they said, Rajat, we tried to do this, but we couldn't afford the NVIDIA GPU that you in G can afford, or a big hospital can afford. We had a very small device, we had a very small SoC. So we did an algorithm parity check to say that we got only a 3% reduction in accuracy by dropping that compute power, the GPU compute power, by 98%. And they said, for the application that we are doing, which is non-medical, this was good enough for us. And I said, fantastic. So sometimes having people with a different mindset and having people with constraints actually allows you to become more innovative and more creative. So we are launching this, as we've launched this in India, we are launching this in other countries, and I'm working very closely with Yelda, who leads our G healthcare business in the region, and with our global team to bring this to Turkey very soon. I think this is extremely important. I personally believe that Turkey is a country with a lot of talent in terms of people, what I call intellectual horsepower, and I think this would be a fantastic place where we could potentially find ways to collaborate and just provide a platform where, whether it's universities or private chains or even individual software vendors, can go and innovate and develop their own platform and their own algorithms. So I thought I just wanted to leave this as a food of thought with all of you when it comes to Edison as a platform. I also wanted to mention that we are not doing this alone because we cannot. As I mentioned before, no one can do this alone. So we've got 3 types of partnerships that we're working on. For example, we have a partnership with Boston's Children's Hospital, which is one of the world's biggest referral sites for kids. Their challenge, I think it's very interesting. So their challenge is, they come to G and they say, our problem is too many referrals. Our problem is everyone wants to refer to us because they don't have expertise, and our concern is a lot of those referrals are false referrals, meaning they didn't need to be referred. It was a normal case. So their challenge is how to filter, prioritize, and focus on the referrals where they can provide precise healthcare versus getting stuck into a referral that was a normal case. So we're trying to work with them on a specific example of fetal brain development, and it's now in F10K approval, where we are trying to embed how to measure the development of the fetal brain using ultrasounds, but based on deep learning. And this is important because when you get a patient in, what you need to do is you need to quickly do an exam, and and the machine itself seamlessly will tell you that out of the 50 patients that were referred, of course look at all 50, but prioritize these 10, because these 10 potentially have a real risk that requires urgent attention, versus these other 40 which look normal, maybe could be an issue, but they can be deprioritized. This is the sort of intelligence and workflow optimization that's going to become more and more critical in the future. And then we have pharma partners, because the other part that we're talking about is how do we do in vivo artificial intelligence. And then finally we have technology partners. As I mentioned before, GPU compute power has become proliferant and cheap and extensive. So we want to make sure that we get the best technology to do so. And then all of this comes into the clinical pathway in 4 different ways. I'm not going to go into detail on this page because it's got a lot of things in there, but there is just one message I would leave with you. The way to think about this is that you need artificial intelligence in detection. So I mentioned before the concept of intelligent work lists. How do you make your work list automatically intelligent so that it prioritizes things that need more attention? How do you do quantification, that it can find priors that actually help the clinician or the doctor make a better decision? Then of course more clinical decision support tools. And finally reporting. Reporting is another thing that I never realized till a few years ago was such a drain on time for radiologists, but even cardiologists. I mean, we've been talking about, and we've just finished a study recently here in Turkey actually with American Hospital, where using basic, and it's not even artificial intelligence, but using basic structured reporting, our new digital tools can report cardiology reporting time for CAT reports by 85%. Can you imagine that the cardiologist now has more time to spend on patients rather than writing reports? Like, isn't that what we want? And isn't that better for, because the other thing I didn't mention in the beginning, which is something I keep on hearing less, because it's like almost a hidden challenge, but I think it's getting concerning, is clinician fatigue. No one is talking about clinician fatigue. Doctors are supposed to be superhumans today. They're supposed to provide the best quality of work at the, at the expense of their personal life, at the expense of everything else, like robots. And clinician fatigue is such an important element. I'll give you another example. The same cardiology tool for echo can do reports that used to take 2 to 4 to 6 hours in 6 clicks. This is not rocket science. This is basic stuff, but that is removing and reducing the fatigue of clinicians and radiologists, improving the patient experience. So the report that took 2 years to come back to the patient who's scared, right? Do I have something? Do I have something? He gets to know immediately. Very good. At the same point of time, the clinician is able to spend extra time either with his loved ones or with the patients rather than writing a report that adds no value at this point of time. These are basic but very critical elements of what we need to do. And then, listen, we have 50 plus applications available today on the Edison platform. And I have given just some examples here. So we have some critical care applications. We have a new tool called Mural, which when you select a patient, it basically takes in all the critical signals from all the various bedside monitors into one single screen. And it does this seamlessly. You don't have to fidget around, it just does it. So for the nurse who's trying to figure out, or the doctor who's come on his round, trying to figure out what's happening with the patient, one click, bam, all the data is there. Another set of examples is deep 3D or 4D images. For example, we have image processing systems which allow you to look at a 4D map of how blood is flowing in the veins, but also how it is actually flowing in the veins. So it's called 4D reconstruction. And then what you do is that when you're trying to do a cath lab procedure, you take that image and then you put it on top of your procedure live, right? So when you're looking at the cath lab, you have the 3D or 4D reconstructed image, and as you are trying to see and guide your system to do the cath lab work, you can see how it looks in real life. This is not magic, this exists today, right? And then finally you have analytics around how do you use your system. Who's your best radiologist? Is it the one who does the most reports? Wait, but if you do a peer review, you see that actually, she's the fastest or he's the fastest, but the quality is not good. How do you figure these things out seamlessly? So these are just some examples of applications that exist today in our digital suite, which will continue to get more and more artificial intelligence elements built into them to make it seamless for precise medicine, for better clinical outcomes, better patient experience at lower clinician fatigue. And then, as I said, right, all of this goes into our devices. So I mentioned the MRI scanner, I mentioned the X-rays for the fetal brain development. I wanted to give one more example here, which is about smart subscription. Today, when you buy a device, you're buying a hardware, like you're buying a CT machine, it's expensive. It's a big piece of investment. And our new model is that these devices are also now powered by Edison. So they have a mini supercomputer inside there. So for example, if the CT machine has a particular algorithm, or if the MRI machine has a particular algorithm, and tomorrow there is a new update on the algorithm, these get seamlessly transferred into the machine gets updated, it tells the doctor, hey listen, I was running my data based on 20 million exams, now I have 22. I have more accuracy. I have more diversity. And this is now built seamlessly into the machines. So, to summarize, Edison is about the platform to develop. Edison is about seamlessly, with ethics and integrity, embedding it into our applications and partner applications. And then it is about seamlessly embedding it into machines so that end of the day, we get the outcomes which we want to focus on, which is precision healthcare at better productivity, at lower cost, with better patient experience, faster turnaround times, and lower clinician fatigue. But we cannot do this alone, right? So I wanted to leave you with this message that we need help. Everyone needs to come on this together. I think we are just at the start of this journey. Maybe in 5 or 10 years, maybe we'll be in a different situation. Healthcare, as you can also understand, is complex because of the right challenges around patient data privacy, the concept of ethics, which we all need to resolve as a team. But I wanted to just leave this as food for thought for all of you. And I wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Karol. May I ask a question for the audience? I think there are lots of academicians and individual researchers inside the audience, and I would like to ask you that what kind of opportunities GE can provide for these individual researchers in Turkey, especially. Not only the funding, but maybe you have some more opportunities, like giving the raw data, something like that, or some computer support.
I did not actually go on this topic even though it was in the page because I knew this question would be asked. If you're a researcher doing your PhD or postdoc or whatever, there are two key challenges that you have when you're trying to work on artificial intelligence or trying to, I think I'll take a step back. Today, there is an expectation, a growing expectation that researchers need to start getting an element at least of becoming a data scientist. So there are two things we can do to help. Number one, we have hired and we have created a new position called Chief Data Officer in our company. Because in healthcare, having the access to the right data, and I'll define right in a second, is critical. And then providing access to that right data to our internal organization, but also to partners and researchers is critical. So what is right data? Right data is large. Right data is diverse. Right data is anonymized, stripped of patient information. And then the right data is culturally insensitive. You need X-rays of people of my shade, darker than me, lighter than me for it to work. So you need diversity in data. And then finally, you need to provide it. So one of the key elements of the Edison platform, Professor, is to provide this data through our data lake on the Edison platform to the researchers. Because if you're a researcher and you're trying to work on a certain problem, let's say mammography. Mammography is a big problem. So I talked about stroke. The next big problem is in mammography. The number of false positives, as you know, is 40-50% globally. So we have now, and we are developing and curating almost data sets that we can make available to researchers as part of the Edison platform. But there are two things. One thing is give access to the data, and then we have something called Edison Workbench. So the raw data and the structured raw data is present on the platform. Then the Workbench has tools, so it has applications, and it has the GPU and the CPU compute power in the back end. And then it has, so that's allow you to develop. And then you have what is called the release, right? So you can either use it for research applications or commercialize or do whatever. You own the IP. But this is critical, right? So thank you for asking this question, because having access to this good data, as I defined before, is critical. And it's one of the key elements of how the Edison platform intends to work beyond the GE ecosystem.
Salondan soru katkı alabiliriz. Bir iki tane. Buyurunuz.
Well, thank you. First of all, I believe your last sentences, but I here wonder that you say that you may provide some sort of accurate data. Here, maybe the problem maybe from the government side, as all the countries lost. So I wonder how you can share this very critical and confident data with the researchers, not only in Turkey, all around the world. And I also wonder the approach from the Turkish Ministry of Health. Have you ever spoken to them?
Yes.
Sorted some issues out?
Yes, we are trying to. And I can share my thoughts.
Ethical approvals are probably another concern as all around the world, not only in Turkey.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I mean, from other side, prospective studies are retrospective studies are easy to perform. You have your data on your hand, but if you do a prospective study, so things may get quite challenging. And when you think about the big data, that may be quite messy and flawed. So I wonder your opinions on those.
To be honest, this whole conversation on data probably deserves a whole other session, but I will give you the answer to the 3 questions you asked. So your first question was, data is difficult to move across geographies. And this is not just here. In Europe, you have something called GDPR. In US, you have HIPAA. So you cannot move data freely. But there are 2 exceptions to the rule. Number 1, we have data from certain organizations where we have patient consent, not just the hospital consent. We have patient consent to be able to use that data for research purposes and commercial purposes. Number 1. Number 2, in Turkey, I have talked to the Vice Minister of Turkey a few times now around this, and we continue to work with him and the team. I personally believe that the Turkish government and the Turkish Ministry of Health are one of the thought leaders around this. Of course, they have similar challenges, but they're trying to figure ways around it. One way around it is we need to find local partners and keep data locally. There are some places where you just cannot move data out, and the data has to be in. I think for me, eventually what will give the Ministries of Health the most comfort is our ability to show that when you strip off personalized information from data, it is truly depersonalized. This is extremely, extremely difficult to do. It's very easy to take away all your biometric data and your demographic data, but the funny thing is that your body actually reveals who you are. You can look at a bone and you can know what your person's age is. You can look at the information and try to triangulate stuff. So it is extremely challenging. So I'm not going to stand here and tell you it's trivial. What I'm telling you, it's an extremely complex problem, and it requires effort from technology companies such as ourselves. It requires maybe creative thinking from startups on how do we continue to make depersonalization of data. And then it continues to require the right support from the ministries of health across the world, not just Turkey, to solve it. So just for you to know, when we started this conversation, one of the biggest concerns was that our initial cloud servers were based in the US, and considering the relationships between US and Turkey, we were advised that we may not want to send Turkish data to US. We said, fair point. So when I'm talking to you about setting up platforms, right, what we are saying is that we can bring data from where it is legal, ethical, and compliant to bring data. But apart from that, we'll have to work with the universities here. When I go and talk to Acıbadem group of hospitals or Memorial group of hospitals, they have petabytes of data. When we go and talk to, where was I, Sibel? We were in Ankara a few months ago, and we go to Kayseri Hospital. There are 35,000 patients coming in every day, from what I was told. There is enough data in this country. There is enough data in every country. Now, is that data going to be diverse? No. So I think for a country like Turkey, maybe it's okay, but for a country like UK, it's not. Where in UK, 40% of the population is of Asian descent and 60% is Caucasian. You need diverse data for it to be successful. But in a place like Turkey, maybe you could get away. But eventually, we need to solve this problem together. And as I said, I'm not going to stand here and tell you that we've solved it yet. What I can tell you is we are continuing to work hard. We are continuing to lobby and educate. At the same point of time, as I said, we need to figure out depersonalization of data. It has not been solved yet. We're getting close, but there are smarter people who figure out a way to reverse engineer and personalize the depersonalized data. And with organizations such as Google around, it's extremely difficult to keep your data separate. But thank you for asking the question. I wish I had a better answer, but do note that getting the right data and having a clear data strategy is extremely paramount to the success of artificial intelligence in healthcare, much more than any other field. Because here we are talking about the fact that if the data of a patient's genetic result reaches the insurance company, guess what they're going to do? They're going to increase the premium of that patient immediately. I would do that if I would be the insurance company. And if I'm Amazon, and by the way, I don't know if you know, so Amazon launched a healthcare service for its employees, I think last week. But you know what they've done? They have actually contracted a third-party company to do it. They are so scared that if they start getting the health data of their own employees, and it mixes with their spending patterns and every other piece of data they have on them, it is scary. So I think the underlying message is, it is a tremendous responsibility for us or whoever else is the custodian of this data to depersonalize it and then keep it depersonalized and not let it mix with anything else. And it's a problem that we need to solve together, and we are making steps and we are not there.